webcast from CESMII, the Smart Manufacturing Institute. My name is Mike Yost, and I'm your host. I will be joined today by Larry Megan, the Senior Director at Linde Digital. Before I bring Larry on to the webcast today, I just wanted to level set a little bit about what we are up to here at CESMII and why we talk about 6 degrees of smart manufacturing. And it's based on the notion of 6 degrees of separation, which states that it's the idea that people are only 6 degrees or fewer away from each other, from knowing every single person on the planet. And so CESMII asks the question that if we're that close to being able to connect with everybody on the planet, how close are we to being able to get the knowledge that we need to make smart manufacturing a reality? We believe that one way for us to help share the knowledge is by hearing from as many different people as we can, getting their perspectives, their vantage point, understanding their experience. And that's what this webcast series is all about. So before I bring Larry on, just a few things about the webcast. First of all, everybody's microphones will be muted throughout the webcast. We use the Zoom webinar platform. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, you should see me in a little thumbnail window, as well as the presentation content that we're using in the background. And you can hover on any of the command bars. There's a Q&A box, and you can ask any questions that you have during the webcast. If we have time to address them, we will. If we don't, we will reply by email to answer questions. You could also submit questions to me by email at mike.yost@cesmi.org. One other thing about the thumbnails is that if you don't like where they are, how big they are, you can just click on the image of me or Larry, and you'll have options for minimizing them or putting them in different places on your screen. So just also to let everybody know that today's webcast is being recorded and we will be putting it online. So hopefully we can continue the discussion online with this webcast series. So with that, I want to introduce today's guest. As I mentioned, his name is Larry Megan. He's the Senior Director at Linde Digital. The Linde Digital team is chartered with enabling digital innovation across their enterprise, which includes manufacturing operations, supply chains, and business practices. As you can see from Larry's bio there, he's been with the organization since the early 1990s and has had a long and distinguished career. And he is a strong contributor to the CESMII ecosystem by having a leadership position on our governance board. And certainly look forward to hearing Larry's experiences. And Larry, thank you very much for agreeing to be here with us today. And welcome to the webcast.
Sure thing. Thanks, Mike.
Excellent. Well, this is more about you than me, you sharing your opinion. So as I like to do, I just want to throw the question at you. If you would just share from your opinion what smart manufacturing looks like to you. We'll take the next 15 or 20 minutes and hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, sure. And so if you want to jump to the next slide, just to hit a couple of points, right? So at a high level, simplistically, right, smart manufacturing is really about, hey, how can we use digital technology to improve how our processes, our plants, our business, how it runs, right? Is it safer? Is it more reliable? Is it more productive? Coming from the chemical process space, we actually have a long history around smart manufacturing across the industry. And so a lot of continuous innovation in the space over the years. So really a lot to share and a lot to talk about of things that we've done in the past, as well as what we see as future opportunities. I think beyond that, though, when you talk about, for folks who are listening and asking themselves, what do we need to do with our business? The one piece of advice that I always give people is it's really up to each organization to really define what its own true north is when it comes to smart manufacturing. Because obviously a lot depends on where you're at today, and it's really less about technology and where do you want to go as a business and where do you want your business to be in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. And then how can the technologies that are encompassed by smart manufacturing really help you meet those important business objectives?
Well, I think that's great advice. And as we talked about the other day, Larry, I think if I was going to write a book on smart manufacturing, these would probably be my first 2 points that I would raise. Because as you mentioned, um, some people look and think that smart manufacturing is brand new. Some people think we've been doing it for a long time. I tend to think it's a bit of both. We have some new
Yep.
things that are available to us today, some new technologies, but it's based on driving improvements, efficiencies, and safety and productivity, reliability, just like you said. And I think that it is really important for people to understand that the technology component is critical, but it's sort of the third leg of the stool when you talk people, processes, and technology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we always tell people is that when you talk about, whatever word you want to use, smart manufacturing, industry 4.0, digital transformation, it's not about technology. It's about really changing how people work and changing how work gets done and changing the business, right? So that's really what it's about. And especially when you're in our business, which is more heavy manufacturing, industrial kind of business, right? Our products are not digital products per se. In the case of Linde, we're in the industrial gas business, right? Our end product is molecule. We're selling molecules to our customers, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, to really help their processes and their business run better. And we're really a supplier to them. And so really from our customers' perspective, they don't care how it gets there. They just care that it gets there reliably and cheaply and efficiently, right? And so how do we use these kinds of technologies to get us there is really what's most important. And when you look at it from an internal perspective, like I say, it's really important to think about, it's really about changing how people work. When you go and automate a plant, or you provide new data for your reliability engineers, or you provide more insight to the business folks around, or more information to the business folks around how they can run the operation, then you're really asking them to change how they work. And more often than not, when these kinds of projects fail, it's typically not because people were not able to come up with some kind of appropriate technical solution, but more often than not, it's because they weren't able to properly manage the change required within the organization, regardless of what level in the organization you're talking about, to really have it, really meet its full effectiveness.
yeah, and in one of our previous sessions, we had someone on from the healthcare space, and they talked about smart manufacturing being a cog in their efforts to drive better healthcare for people. So, there's a bigger picture from a business perspective at play, and that there's the potential by providing, the capabilities and improvements and information that smart manufacturing offers to help improve those top line businesses.
That's
Um,
right.
and I think that's great, and have been part of that. I think folks are learning that, but still have a ways to go as far as understanding how they define their true north. So maybe just a quick second, if you wouldn't mind talking about, you're talking about culture, right? You're talking about people being willing to accept. So now all of a sudden we have more information. If my information shows that you're not necessarily performing at the level that you think you are, or
Right.
cast a bad light on one business group versus another business group, people aren't necessarily as accepting of the information. So how has your experience been as far as working with people to say the
Yeah.
information I'm giving you is good for you, not bad?
So the one thing that we have that really benefits the work that we do is more broadly within Linde and then with Praxair previously, because Linde is really a recently merged organization of two large industrial gas companies. And I come from the Praxair side of that. And even for the past, 20 years within Praxair, we've had a very strong culture around productivity, right? Around continuous improvement, around what are you doing better every day? And so that really then benefits what we do from a technology perspective, because if the executive team is really putting pressure on the businesses to show those kinds of improvements, there's only so many problems you can fix because you had billing problems or, whatever it is, right? Sort of low hanging fruit. And so there comes a point where you've picked all the low hanging fruit. Now you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what really more substantive improvements can we make to our business now to really get us there? And even though it's not, because we've been at it for a long time, there's not many things that we do where we're going to see a 10% improvement in efficiency or a 20% improvement in throughput or whatever it is. So maybe it's still a percent or 2% at a time, but it's just a culture that's just continuously pushing on that and driving on that. And that's really, like I say, a real benefit. So you certainly have those issues with respect to, hey, if we have dirty laundry, we don't necessarily want to show it. But if you have an executive strategy or a senior leadership strategy around, like I say, really having to continuously improve your business, then that helps overcome a lot of that, a lot of those things. And then frankly, at that point, honestly, it becomes easier for us to then honestly be transparent and start to show, hey, you know what? This business is doing better at X than this other business. And as long as it's not done in a punitive way, but to say, hey, you know what? You guys have a real opportunity to improve over here. And we can show you how to do it because we've proven it somewhere else within the business. That's really what helps overcome a lot of those barriers.
Yeah, I think as an industry overall, we have to also understand. I think it's critical and valuable, as you just stated, that there's senior level strategic view of where the business is going, and that's shared and it works its way through the rest of the organization. But that needs to translate also to the way we compensate people and the way we measure people. Right? We may have a big picture, a vision of strategically where we want to go, but still we're paying people or we're judging them quarter to quarter or year to year based on old metrics or old behaviors that don't necessarily align with strategically where we want the business to go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's obviously everybody has P&L level, right? You got to show a return on investment for the company. But beyond that, to your point, like within our organization, we're very explicit globally around what productivity benefits or continuous improvement benefits are each business showing, right? And we have processes and machinery in place and people in place to help assess that, and we partner with them, right? We're very transparent around what's the reliability, what's the uptime of our plants, because that's very important in our business. And again, so we have a lot of transparency around those KPIs, which are then sort of, I don't know if you can call them leading or lagging indicators, but they're indicators beyond just the basics of the financial metrics, right? To really show where the opportunity improvements.
Yeah, you brought up something I didn't intend to go here, but you just triggered something when you're talking about reliability and such of the assets. In addition to the work that you do internally to adopt these technologies and drive your reliability and such, you have equipment providers that are doing the same thing, that are looking at how can they improve the reliability and maybe even sell uptime as opposed to selling the physical assets themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a view of what's in it from a strategic business perspective is a better driver, because you're going to have technology coming at you from every single different angle you can think of.
Yeah, I agree. That's an interesting point because, to your point, right, everybody now who's not just going to sell you, used to just say, okay, we're going to build a plant and we're going to buy hardware from 50 different vendors. But now every one of those vendors wants to sell not just hardware, but they want to sell a solution, right? They want to sell hardware, IoT-enabled hardware, and we'll put your data in the cloud, and we can monitor the asset and all that kind of stuff, right? And we do the same thing. So one of the important business tenets for us is, at the end of the day, we own the data, right? I don't care who I'm buying the equipment from, but like I say, we may be buying from 50 different suppliers, and our operations team are not going to 50 different locations to see what's going on with their plants, right? So a key tenet for us is that we own the data. So we need to have basically real-time or near real-time access to the data if we don't have it already, and we'll use that to make the decisions we want to make.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a smart move as well. So I'd like to transition. You had mentioned before, and we created another slide here to talk about how smart manufacturing. It's okay that it looks different to different business units, right? So you want to talk a little bit about the points that you raised here?
Sure. So like I say, right at the beginning, everybody's at a different place. And especially now when we talk about our company, because it's a merged organization. And so even though the two companies were fundamentally doing the same thing, once you get into it, you see that they were sometimes going at it quite differently. So everybody's in a little bit different place to where they're at, and that's okay, right? So as you define your true north as a business, you have to say, okay, where do we want to be? What's the objective? And then that'll define our strategy versus somebody coming from the outside and telling us what our strategy should be. But I mean, across not just Linde, but the industrial gas organization or industrial gas business in general, right? There's some key things that really help drive our strategy, right? Going back to really letting the business drive the strategy. So I've already mentioned, right, reliability. I mean, at the end of the day, our customers really view us as a utility. So we're there to provide molecules to run their operations. We're no different than electricity and water, right? You open up the valve and the oxygen just has to be there, right? No questions asked. And so high uptime of our facilities, and it's even those kinds of guarantees are embedded into our contracts with our customers. And so, supply reliability is important. Our plants, especially our large process plants, are run by a lot of big spinning machines. We have compressors that use tens of megawatts of power. And so they're so big, you don't have like a hot spare ready to go if something fails. And so basically avoiding catastrophic failures or even temporary failures of those machines is really important to us. So that does a lot from drives a lot of our smart manufacturing thinking. We've done a lot over the years around, low cost sensing. How do we use data better with that? And then how do we build analytical solutions to then feed that back to our operations team, our reliability engineers, sometimes even our customers, to really understand better, how do we get away from a scheduled maintenance kind of a strategy to much more of a condition-based predictive maintenance kind of strategy. And we've done a lot of work in that space, but we're continuing. That's an area where we just continue to. A second area for us is because the nature of our business, I always say, look, if you're Exxon, you might have a half a dozen really large facilities in the United States. And because of the size of those facilities, you can have a dedicated engineering staff there. We may have order of magnitude a similar number of assets on the ground, but they're much more highly distributed. We have, by our metrics, over 100 large plants in the US and probably 300 or 400 smaller ones. And you probably triple that if you look globally. And so as a result, you can't afford to have engineering expertise local to the plants. And in fact, sometimes we don't even have people at the plants most of the time. So this whole concept of remote connectivity, and really, instead of having, especially if a plant has a problem, you don't want to have to take the expert and bring them to the plant. You want to bring the problem back to the expert regardless of where they sit. Right. Because they may be here in Buffalo where I am, they may be in Shanghai, they may be in Rio de Janeiro. And so this whole idea, we have a lot of infrastructure that we've built over the years. It's not a 1 or 2 year thing, where now pretty much anybody in the world can see every plant in the world as long as they have the appropriate accesses and we manage the security and all of that. And so as a result, then we can really bring the problems to the experts and really work in a collaborative way when we have problems. So those are really just just two fundamental tenets to our strategy. One I didn't mention here, but I'll mention very briefly, is that, as I mentioned, our plants are very energy intensive. And so we are continuously looking around how do we improve the energy efficiency. And it's, if you have a fixed asset, if you will, there's things you can do from an equipment perspective, right? Maybe we can come up with a more a modern aerodynamic design for our compressors. But there's also, we do a lot from an automation perspective. When you go back to smart manufacturing, we do closed loop control, not only of nominal plant operation, but even we can fully automate the startup of many of our facilities. And then finally, the last thing, an interesting thing that we're thinking about right now is around people development, right? Because given all of this technology that goes into the plants, the profile of an operator, for example, is very different today than it was 10 years ago. And we anticipate it will be different 10 years in the future. And so maybe there'll be less of an operator and more of an efficiency evaluator, if you will. And so they'll have to understand how to use data better. They'll have to maybe have more process engineering skills. They'll have to, like I say, just have greater technical bandwidth to really do what we want them to do, because the automation in the facilities is kind of taking care of most of the minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour issues with the plants, right? So that's a challenge for us right now, is how do we evolve our people to really work in a more digital future?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge. I also think that's what's exciting about the future, right?
Yep.
And I think as we look at as a sort of the tech savviness as a I don't know, I guess as a whole people, people are getting more and more tech savvy all the time, and so it becomes sort of digital natives, as you will.
Right.
Expect those sorts of things. So
that's right.
Well, Larry, I warned you that our time was going to fly by, and it has. We are up to the end of it, and I would just like to sort of throw the question back to you. If you have a quick soundbite, anything that you would want the folks to take away, what you think smart manufacturing looks like to you.
Yeah, what I always tell people is smart manufacturing or digital transformation or Industry 4.0, again, it's not about better technology, it's about changing how people work. So really think through how you're going to manage that going forward if you really want to be successful.
Outstanding. I appreciate that very much. Very much. So with that, we're going to wind down today's webcast. I just want to encourage everybody to stay engaged with us. Feel free to submit questions or topics, volunteer people to be on an upcoming webcast as a guest. Sign up yourself to be a guest if you'd like. My email will be here on the last slide, and encourage you to stay in touch with us. Our next webcast event will be 2 weeks from today at the same time, at which time we will welcome Michelle Pastel from Corning to join us so she can share her perspective of what smart manufacturing looks like to her. So again, I'd like to thank everybody very much for being part of this. Thank you, Larry, for sharing your experiences, and we'll let you all get on with your day. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.